Hello, my friends. Greg Koukl, Stand to Reason is the show. And for me, this is our second hour. Some of you may be listening your first hour. This is why I recommend that you get the podcast because you won't miss anything. STR.org has the podcast. So does iTunes. Just check out Stand to Reason, and you'll get it. I've got some callers in the queue here, and I'll get to you in just a moment. For your information, our number is 855-243-9975. If you'd like to call during our live show, which is Tuesday nights from 4 until 7, 855-243-9975, 4 to 7 Los Angeles time, and be glad to chat with you about anything that's on your mind in the broad area of ethics, values, and religion. I was deeply frustrated today by something that I heard on the radio. It was additionally frustrating because it was coming from somebody whose thinking I generally respect, but it was a mistake that I actually hear many people make with regards to religion and faith and knowledge and truth. And the point of view that was being advanced is that the question of truth is not really that important when it comes to religion, because what religion is not so much a matter of truth, but a matter of faith. And if another way of putting this line is that if this is just something the religious claims could be proved, is a way of people put it, if they could be proved, then where is room for faith? Now, of course, I think you can see in this equation that knowledge and faith are at the opposite ends of the spectrum here. Things that you prove are things that you can know. You can't know them unless you prove them. They're over here on one side. And then other things you just simply believe. Some things you know, other things you simply believe. This is the things that you have faith in. These are the things that can't be proved, and you exercise faith to apprehend them. They are unrelated to knowledge, and if unrelated to knowledge, then therefore unrelated to truth. You don't ask the question about whether they're true or not. You ask the question, it really amounts to whether you believe it or not. Now, first observation about this way of approaching it is that this is actually a secular view of the faith-religion project. This is a secular view. It is a view that many devoutly religious people have, but I just want you to know that it's a secular view. It's the same view the secularists have, that when it comes to religion, we're not talking about knowledge, we're not talking about truth. Those are irrelevant categories to the issue. What we're talking about is faith and belief. And here they put the word belief and faith in the same category, that there are some things you know and other things you believe, though you don't know them. And these are just leaps, essentially, unrelated to evidence. That's the secular view. Now, the confusion here, I think, abounds principally because of confusion on the meaning of the important words in this discussion, words like belief and truth and faith and knowledge. These words need to be clarified. And though we've talked about this on the show in the past, and it seems like I address this with some frequency because of the confusion even in the church, at the same time, review is in order. And the repetition is the mother of learning, I guess, or something like that. So let's just go over these words. And I want you to make a mental note of the distinctions between these four words, belief, truth, faith, and knowledge, that are in play in this conversation. All right? And then when we get the definitions clearly before us, then we'll revisit this other question. And the word that actually is the one that is most misunderstood, I think, is the word belief. Because the word belief is the one most associated with religious enterprise. And when it's associated with religious enterprise, it is considered by definition to be something that is disconnected from knowledge. There are things you know, and there are other things you just simply believe. And this, I think, is the root of the problem. Because there's a very clear definition of belief in philosophical circles. And when I say philosophical circles, I don't mean that only philosophers believe that belief means what I'm going to offer you. It's just that philosophers, people in philosophical circles, they're more clear on this and more intentional about their understanding. But even you, the rank and file, anybody outside of those circles understand these things as well, but they are not thinking clearly about those meanings. This will be evident in just a moment when I explain it. What is belief? Here it is. A belief is a mental activity. This is something that goes on in your mind, all right? It's a mental activity in which one holds that a thing is so. It's a mental activity, a holding that a thing is so. Now, if that sounds complicated, it's not. It's easy, okay? I believe I'm talking here on the radio show. I believe that it is the case. It is my conviction that it is the case, that this is actually happening. Now, it's possible for my belief to be false. One can be mistaken about his belief, but a belief is a point of view about reality. So in that sense, all beliefs are implicit truth claims. They are implicit statements about the way reality is. Now, whether or not one's belief is true is a different matter. We'll get to that in a moment. But all beliefs are a holding that something is a certain way. And this is not restricted to religious convictions. Every scientific notion entails belief. Now, some of you are uneasy with that because you're saying, no, that's not belief, that's fact. Well, it may or may not be fact, but that doesn't obviate belief from the equation. It doesn't mean that belief isn't part of it. If you hold that gravity exists, you are believing in gravity. Your belief may be true, but it's a belief nonetheless. Every single attitude you have about what the world is like entails a belief. That's what the word means. It isn't just restricted to religion. All attitudes regarding fact entail beliefs, period. Even atheists, they are thick with beliefs. Doesn't mean they have religion. It means they have beliefs. They have an attitude or a mental perspective regarding the way the world actually is. A belief is a mental activity in which one holds that a thing is so. And so, therefore, all beliefs entail implicit truth claims. Now, but are the beliefs actually true? Well, this depends on what you mean by true. A belief is a thinking that something is so. If the thinking is correct and the world is the way you think it is or the way you believe it to be, then your belief is true. Truth is when your beliefs about the world are accurate. That's all there is to it. It's not complicated. And in fact, you know this. You know the definition of belief and truth because you use these notions all the time. Now, sometimes we use the word belief to emphasize our uncertainty. Well, the bus is coming at 8. That's what you said, right? Well, I believe so. So when you say I believe so, you always believed it. But now you're qualifying it a little bit and you're kind of emphasizing, I believe it, but I'm not certain. I think so, but I could be wrong. Okay, so you're emphasizing your uncertainty a little bit when you use the word belief there, but still you're holding that a thing is true. And if your belief is accurate, then it's true. If it matches the way the world actually is, then it's considered true. Now what is What is faith then? If every understanding of the way the world is entails a belief, then how do you distinguish belief from faith? Very simple. Faith is an act of trust based on what you believe is true. Faith is an act of trust based on what you believe is true. I'll give you a very simple example, though examples abound. Yesterday, I got on a shuttle at Vail and went to the city of Eagle to board an airplane that took me to Denver and then board another airplane that took me to LAX. Now, before I began my journey, I believed, that is, I held to be true, that these airplanes would function a certain way mechanically, would be able to accomplish certain tasks, that is, get me to my destination, according to a certain published schedule. I believed that all of those things were true. But I did not exercise faith in that belief or those beliefs until I got on the airplane. Now, do you see the difference between thinking that it's the case and then entrusting myself to it? Of course you do. It's very simple. Faith is an act of trust based upon beliefs. And if it's a wise, intelligent faith, it's based on beliefs that are true, demonstrable, well evidenced. If you just get in a rickety-rackety thing with some kind of propeller on it and wound up by rubber bands or run by gophers or whatever and expect to get to your destination, well, that's an act of faith, but it's a blind faith. It's a foolish faith. In either case, there is faith being exercised. Now, notice I'm using the word faith here in a way that isn't necessarily religious, and that's true because the object of faith here is not a religious thing. It's getting on an airplane, but still, the kind of faith that I'm talking about, which is trust in action, is evidenced in these non-religious commitments and actions and behaviors. All right, so we have a belief that when put into action is an example of trust that is faith. And if the belief is true, then the faith is well justified. The last word is knowledge, and knowledge is a very simple concept. Knowledge is accurate beliefs that are adequately justified. Accurate beliefs. Notice that all knowledge entails belief. All knowledge entails belief. You believe something is so, and your belief is accurate, and you have good reasons to believe that. You didn't just make a wild guess and get lucky. You have good reasons to believe it. That's knowledge. Now back to our religious question issue. Does truth matter when it comes to religious questions? Yes, of course it matters. Think of Judaism. Do you think it mattered whether or not to the foundations of Judaism, whether God actually called Abraham in Genesis chapter 12? If God did not actually in history call Abraham, can you see how that would undermine the Jewish religion as an historic religion? What about Moses? If there was no Moses, or Moses didn't receive the Ten Commandments, or better yet, if Moses did not deliver the nation of Israel from the Pharaoh, you have this great act of salvation that happened in history. If that didn't happen, can't you see that historic Judaism is being undermined? Sure. Now, you could say, well, look, I can still have my moral commitments as a Jew, even if I don't believe any of those things happened. And my response is, well, you would have that. You'd have your morality intact, but you wouldn't have your religion intact, because Judaism isn't based on a morality. It's based on God intervening in history, giving a morality, but the morality isn't the core of it. It's God's intervention in history to rescue Israel, his people that he used for a larger rescue of the world through his Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. You see how the truth matters there? Paul says when it comes to the resurrection, if Christ did not rise from the dead, you ought to pity Christians. The truth mattered there too. Now, it might be someone will say, well, all those theological details aren't what matters. What matters is God's real, and he gave his law, and morality is real, and we have to live by good ethics. Well, the truth matters there then, doesn't it? That is a truth that matters. So ultimately, truth does matter. Now, whether you are certain of the truth that matters, whether it is well justified, that's an entirely different matter. Yes, we have beliefs about spiritual things. It is critical whether or not those beliefs are true. If we are not sure about the truthfulness of the beliefs, we can still move out and exercise trust, even in our uncertainty. You might look at the frozen lake and say, I don't know if that's thick ice or thin ice. I don't know. I might fall through, but I'm going to go out on that lake, out on that ice. So you inch yourself out on that ice, and maybe you have timid faith, but you are still committed, and you inch yourself out. But the fact may be that it's thick ice. And even though you don't have knowledge, you don't have good justification, still the ice is thick. And so it is true that the ice will hold you even if you're timid in exercising your faith. By the same token, when it comes to spiritual things, the truth matters. Boy, does it. Faith is an act of trust in what you believe is actually so. Probably the more evidence that you have that what you believe is actually true, the more confident your faith will be. And sometimes we do our best with what we have, and we take our step of trust, not certain whether the ice is thick or not. But those are distinctions, those words that are really important to keep in mind. Belief, a mental activity, which one holds a thing is so. Truth is if you're right, if your beliefs match the way the world is. Faith is an act of trust based on what you believe. And knowledge is accurate beliefs that are adequately justified. Faith is not just for religion. And faith and knowledge are not contrary to each other. And truth does matter. There you go. All right. Questions, comments, calls in just a moment here on Stand to Reason.
You can find STR on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and Pinterest. Interact with STR staff, post comments, get involved with other like-minded Christians. Want to know what is going on with STR? Speaking events, new podcasts, resources, and articles? Follow STR online. You can find all of our social media connections at str.org.
Greg Koukl here on Stand to Reason, giving you a piece of my mind every Tuesday night. That's the live show that you can call in on. Broadcast in most markets on Sundays. But Tuesday night is a live show from 4 until 7. From 4 until 7, had to correct myself there. Los Angeles time, the number is 855-243-9975 if you want to give us a call during the live show. We've got a lot of folks on here now, so let's chat with them. This is Chris in Michigan. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Greg. How you doing?
Doing good. Welcome to the show.
Well, quickly, I had the pleasure of meeting you when you spoke at Abdul Murray's fundraiser a few years back, and I got a picture with you, and somehow I deleted it. So we got to get you back here to Michigan
okay.
so I can get another picture.
Was that with Abdul Murray and there in Detroit area?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That was fun.
Yes. Also, I wanted to encourage your listeners to become monthly supporters.
Thank you.
The SCR has been an invaluable an invaluable resource in helping with my personal discipleship and with, sharing the videos that you guys do and articles when trying to help people to see things more clearly from a biblical perspective. So
Yeah, well,
thank you guys
thanks.
for all the hard work you do. Okay. Well, now to my tough question. I have a strange situation where I'm a bit, my mother was basically disowned by her mother when my grandmother had my mother when she was 13. My grandmother got married a few years later and disowned her and my eldest aunt, who were kids that she had out of wedlock. So I've been a part of this estranged family all of my life. I've never really had an extended family beyond my mother and my siblings. And so my mother had a stroke 10, 15 years ago. There was a chance for me to try to, because they never explained to me what had happened. And so I tried to bridge the relationship with the extended family. Didn't quite pan out. They didn't really seem to have an interest in having a relationship with me either. But I have cousins that are closer to my age that don't really have any of the association with whatever happened. One of them is getting married, and she sent me an invitation to the wedding. I elected not to go to the wedding because my position as a Christian is that weddings are people who participate in weddings, who come to view the wedding, are supposed to be witnesses, and we're supposed to be the people who help hold the couple accountable in honoring God and staying committed to one another and to God. And so, I think that's the way that we look at. I think that's part of the tradition of marriage here in America, and that's kind of how I look at it.
I think that is true in a number of communities, especially Christian, evangelical Christian communities. I noticed as an adult that there was this emphasis at weddings where the audience was asked to do that very thing, participate in the sense of holding the married couple accountable and being part of their lives. I don't think that's inherent to weddings. I think that is a peculiar, or I should say unique, characteristic of certain Christian weddings, but that's something that was new to me, and I don't think it's inherent in weddings. I think the idea of a wedding generally is that the community is celebrating this union, and that would be bare minimum. It doesn't have to go beyond that to be a longer-term commitment to that couple's life. I don't actually think that's what wedding amounts to. Weddings celebrations amount to, though that might be an added thing, especially for those who are close in the Christian community. When I've been at weddings and that kind of statement has been made, we're going to all commit ourselves to be behind this relationship over time, et cetera, I've not always amened that because I haven't been in a relationship with that couple or whatever that allowed me to make that kind of commitment to them. So I don't hold that kind of commitment to be a standard part of marriage, though I think it is sometimes part of a marriage ceremony.
Okay, well that'll definitely influence your response to my actual question. Well, that was my reason for electing not to go to the wedding, because I feel like we have diluted and diminished certain values from that are given to us in our Christian worldview, and I don't want to continue to contribute to that when I reflect and I'm aware of that. So I'm just trying to do my little part.
Sure, I appreciate that. Right. We all have to make our decisions about those kinds of things. That's fine.
Okay, so but to my question, which is kind of about same-sex unions, I was pondering this about a week ago when I was listening to a podcast from I don't know how long ago, because I had been catching up, when you were talking to a photographer who had declined to perform, to take pictures for when requested by same-sex union, same-sex couple. And so I was wondering at the time, well, if we are, why do we have no conviction? Not we, but I mean those who do. They have some people have no convictions about participating, taking pictures, providing cake, music, whatever services that are requested to a heterosexual union marriage that isn't Christian.
All right.
Versus they oppose doing it for
same-sex unions.
The same-sex unions, and I get the fact that they're saying, well, we don't want to support this celebration or endorse this celebration. And I wonder, well, why don't we feel the same way when it's a non-Christian wedding? If our principle is that what we're opposing is, something that God doesn't endorse.
Well,
And
okay, that's the key here. Now the question is whether these two things are parallel or not. If they are parallel in a morally relevant way, then it seems that the same moral rule should apply in both cases. But you just made a statement that I want to take exception with. The same-sex marriage, we have a union that is, we'll just say, is inappropriate from God's perspective. That's our conviction.
yeah,
Without having to cash that out anymore, I think that's clear enough for now. But you implied that when non-Christians get married, that also is somehow morally compromised from God's perspective, and that's why there's a parallel with same-sex marriage. But how is it if two non-Christians get married, are they compromising the concept of marriage somehow morally?
well, I don't believe that they're compromising the concept of marriage. I just don't view it as marriage that God is per se blessing or endorsing if the two participants aren't Christian.
Well, why? Well, I don't know. I don't know why he wouldn't want to endorse or bless the marriage, even though they're not Christian, because the marriage is something different than their convictions about God, salvation, Jesus, all those other things. God said, "Be fruitful, multiply, and subdue." He didn't say only if you're Christian or imply something like that. He gave a general mandate to all mankind, and marriage is part of the "be fruitful and multiply." The two become one flesh. So if two are becoming one flesh in that sense, to follow implicitly or explicitly the command to be fruitful and multiply, why would God not be blessing that? Why would he object to that?
I guess I look at it from the sense of, well, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?
Well,
And I'm not opposed to, virtuous acts or behaviors, from non-Christians. I mean, it's obvious that those things do take place. I guess I just, wonder in the scope of us from the perspective of a Christian and what our goal is in life, and I guess that's the perspective that I'm looking at it from.
yeah,
Me as a
okay.
Christian, I'm trying to do things to promote the gospel, the life-saving,
No,
the
I
life-saving message.
I understand that, but look at if a man owns a business and he conducts his business with integrity, he doesn't have differing weights and different measures. He conducts his business with integrity. Just taking that business in isolation and that enterprise in isolation, do you think God is unhappy with that if he conducts his business with integrity? I don't think he is. I think God is happy with that kind of thing. Now, your verse, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Well, I agree with that notion that, there's nothing that you could trade for your eternal soul, but that's not the question here. It isn't like either be a Christian or be successful in business, or even be a Christian or get married or something. These are activities that are human activities that are unrelated to the broader issue of salvation. And so I don't. There is nothing morally suspect about non-Christians doing business with integrity. Let me back up and put it this way: there's nothing morally suspect about a non-Christian doing business simply in virtue of the fact that he's non-Christian. And by the same token, there's nothing morally suspect about marriage of non-Christians simply in virtue of the fact that they're non-Christians. In the case of same-sex marriage, something that God ordained for heterosexual unions for human beings, not just Christians, is being distorted and twisted so that the function and the purpose of family that God has ordained for the goodness and flourishing of humanity is being undermined. That's a problem. And I can see how people would not want to participate in undermining that by giving their services to that celebration. They want to retain the freedom to say no. By the same token, though, if somebody is not a Christian and they get married and they're heterosexual, then they are participating in a God-ordained institution the way God ordained it, at least insofar as that goes. And I don't see any reason why one ought to isolate themselves or separate themselves from that simply because God's not somehow explicitly invoked. I mean, if you don't want to go and you don't want to go to a service where God isn't explicitly and meaningfully invoked in marriage, fine. That's an individual decision, but I don't think there's anything about that in itself that is morally questionable just because they're not Christian. Look, at a lot of Christian weddings aren't
Yeah,
end up being
exactly.
sound either, So so I guess I'm not on board with you on this one on that particular aspect.
Okay. Well, I guess I was kind of taking a bit of a backdoor approach. That's not necessarily what I was necessarily advocating. I'm of the opinion that, from the perspective of a person who runs a business, you know, I don't necessarily feel like we should. I think it's an individual decision based on individual convictions. But I don't necessarily feel like I'm thinking, if I'm putting myself in the shoes, like if a person asks me to perform a service, I'm not sure that I would say no. I
Uh-huh.
don't. It would never be my intent.
You mean
To,
regarding same-sex marriage or
yes,
about
starting regarding
okay.
same-sex marriage. I mean, I guess I'm struggling with the, why we feel comfortable doing one and not the other. I know generally why that. I guess
Well, the
that's
reason
where my struggle is at.
I offered the answer because one seems to be an immoral in an enterprise. That is,
Right.
it's a pursuit of something contrary to the way God purposed it, that is a destructive thing. And yet the other isn't. It's the way God purposed it. Same-sex marriage is not God's intention. This is very clear,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and but heterosexual marriage is. So it doesn't matter what somebody's deeper convictions about Jesus and the resurrection and the cross happen to be. The marriage can be taken on its own as fulfilling a purpose of God, even if they don't acknowledge it. So somebody asked me once, and I just saw it today in my notes, and I don't think I ever referred to it on the air, but I can do it now because it applies. And it was what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do if he were a baker being invited or asked to bake a cake for a same-sex union, or say a photographer or something like that? So what would Jesus do? I think Jesus wouldn't do it. I think that's obvious. He wouldn't do it because the whole enterprise is by nature dishonoring to God. So why would he participate in that? Why would he choose to participate in that? For the profit? There's no benefit, in that. But if it were a heterosexual union with non-Christians, I don't see any reason that Jesus would balk.
Well, I can definitely agree with you with that. I see
Okay.
Jesus went to weddings in the scriptures, and who knows
Oh,
what
there you
the
go.
worldview of those participants were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess that's something that I struggle with. In my mind, I guess I have a very evangelistic heart, and my
Well, good
intent
for
would
you
be
on that. Sure.
to leave opportunity to preach the gospel. Like, it's one thing if I talk about the gospel too much, and they say, you know what, we're going
Shut
to
up.
pass on you.
Yeah.
It's another thing for me to, I'm just not at the place where my convictions would say, well, I just wouldn't do it because I see it as a sense of endorsement.
Mm-hmm.
The way I look at it is, God's end is salvation. God's means is the way we live our lives. Us, in preaching the gospel when the opportunity arises. And, so I guess, the way I was looking at things were from the standpoint of, well, from God's perspective, there is an end to all of the things that he endorses and allows, both, endorses as in virtuous good,
Right.
pointing to him symbolically, and allows, sinful sin running wild and us, reflecting the worst of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the end of the day, God has an end that he's allowing all of these means to take place for. And I was kind of looking at, well, what's the difference between a heterosexual marriage
Yeah.
that doesn't point to God, intentionally
I got
point to
you.
God.
Well, I hope I've helped you to see the difference
Yeah.
in those, and just so you be able to make your distinctions. Hey, sometimes we end up on different sides because we have different kind of conscience sensibilities, which is okay too. But I think you're asking the right kinds of questions. Thanks a lot for the call, Chris. Let's go to break real quickly here, and then I'll be back with more of your calls on Stand to Reason.
At Stand to Reason, we depend on the support of donors to carry on our mission to equip Christian ambassadors, and your non-cash donation items can help. You can transform your old cars, cell phones, or other items into ministry impact by donating them to Stand to Reason. Think of it. Because of your donation, Christians just like you will be able to effectively share their faith and change the lives of others forever. To make non-cash donations of all kinds to Stand to Reason, call iDonate at 877-897-4273 or go to idonate.com and visit STR's page. They'll take care of everything for you and Stand to Reason. Just call them at 877-897-4273 or visit idonate.com. Thank you very much for making Stand to Reason's work possible.
Quick reminder here that Rethink is coming to Southern California once again, 3 years in a row. That's the Rethink Apologetics Youth Conference, September 26th and 27th. It's going to be held at Orange County at the Crossline Church. Just like the last 2 years, we had great turnouts each year. I think 400 the first year, 600 plus the second year, and we're expecting even more this time around. You can get the details at rethinkapologetics.com. Early bird registration, $29, ends August 15th. That's like 2 weeks. After that, it goes up $10 for pre-conference registration, then 10 more for at-the-door registration. But even $50 at the door is great for a day and a half of fantastic teaching with great speakers. Dealing specifically with the concerns of youth. And, of course, Brett Koukl will be there, and Alan Schleman, and I'll be there, and Sean McDowell, and J.P. Jones, and a number of others that we've been on board in the past and really, I think, delivered well regarding the needs of youth in apologetics, and you're going to get the same kind of thing this next year. So bring your youth crew. That's what a lot of folks have done in the past. That's September 26th and 27th, a Rethink Apologetics Youth Conference in Orange County, Crossline Church. All right? rethinkapologetics.com for all the info. Let's go to Dusty. Hello, Dusty. Welcome to the show.
How you doing, Greg?
Doing good. Good. Thanks. What's up?
Excellent. So my question is, I was recently talking to a friend about positive commands, and we got on the topic of 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray without ceasing.
Uh-huh.
And he asked me, is this a suggestion, or is this, what does this look like? And I said, it looks like a command, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks and everything. And he said, so what does it mean? What does it mean? And I said, well, I think it means to pray always, to not stop. And he said, well, do you stop? And I said, well, yeah. I stop when I sleep. I stop when I work. Sometimes while I'm working, I'm throwing up prayers because I messed up, or I'm throwing up prayers right before I go on a meeting with someone that things can get heated up in between us, or, whatever.
Yeah.
But I said, to pray while I'm working, I wouldn't be a good steward. I would mess up all over the place.
Right.
I can barely think.
Some things take concentration that prayer would interfere with, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was just thinking I've been thinking about this a lot, and even just riding my bike, I'll be trying to pray. And I think you were talking about acts, adoration, confession, thanksgiving.
Well, it's a standard,
right?
It's a standard. I don't use that very much, but others have, and it's a standard way of kind of organizing your prayer life, right?
And the reason why I bring that up is I think I get to feed before I'm looking at the river and thinking, wow, that water looks nice, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even get through acts.
Listen, I am sympathetic. I was driving today during the. I left my home at 10:15, and I come up Conejo Valley on the 101. Then I cross over at Malibu.
Where the mountain lions cross.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. That's what they say. But where Malibu Canyon is, and then I cut through the mountains, the coastal mountains, and drop off in Malibu, and then head up the coast to get to the office. It's a really nice drive. It takes me an hour and a half, but even so, it's fairly painless because of the beauty. But I use that time for praying, oftentimes, and especially on the front end. But I kept getting distracted by the beauty around me, and I used the occasion. Though I got off my prayer track, if you will, I still was thanking God for the beauty and of Southern California, and I was thanking God that I got a chance to live here in this particular place, Conejo Valley, with my family because it's pretty, and it's peaceful, and it's reasonably safe. But to the specific concern about how do you pray without ceasing? Look at this kind of unit of exhortations that start um, let's say in verse 14. Actually, there's more above it, but admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with everyone, don't repay evil for evil, seek after the good for each person, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, and everything give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Do not quench the spirit. Does not. So there's a whole bunch of exhortations here, right? These are behaviors or attitudes, ways of life that we are encouraged to build into our own lives. Yes, they're commands, they're not suggestions. However, I don't think as a command, it's meaning that pray without ceasing, it means that you are always saying words to God. Because if you are always saying words to God, then you aren't going to be able to admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, etc. Because you can't be talking to people and talking to God at the same time. So if one's understanding of prayer is just saying words to God, well, you can't do that unceasingly, and partly because you got to sleep and eat sometimes, and you got other things to do, plus you got other commands in Scripture. So I don't take this phrase to mean that you are always talking to God. Notice how it says, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks. It's interesting, if you took everything give thanks to be constant saying thank you, then you wouldn't have any time to rejoice or to pray, which the other two things it says to do always.
Right.
Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks. If you took those in kind of wooden literalism, you wouldn't possibly be able to fulfill that, because if you're rejoicing, I guess you could say you could rejoice and give thanks at the same time, but I think you get my point. These are, I think, attitudes that are supposed to be part of our personality or our behavior. So Paul is telling the Thessalonians, be people that are rejoicing, be cheerful people, be people of prayer, continually praying, have a general attitude of prayer. When he says pray without ceasing, he's exaggerating a little bit. He wants us to have a general attitude in a frame of mind of being conscious about God. I think this is possible. Think about, are you married?
I am.
By the way, that word is hyperbole. I should have thought of the Monty Python hyperbole, because that's the way they say it, but hyperbole. So it's pray without ceasing. It's always being there. So if your wife and you were always together, enjoying things together, you're traveling together, you would be in her company all of the time, even though you were attending to other things. And it would be easy to turn aside and make an explicit statement to her, but you would still be, even if you weren't explicitly communicating, you would be in communion with each other. I think that's what this is about. I think that there's a sense of being in communion close with God, and sometimes you are explicitly communicating to Him about these things, but even when you're not communicating directly to Him, you are in an atmosphere of communion with Him that is like prayer, even though you're doing other things. You're driving along. He's like your companion. Brother Lawrence talked about, the mystic talked about practicing the presence of God. I think this is what is in view here. Yes, there are going to be a lot more things that you are praying about, but you're not just devoting to times of prayer. You are also in an ongoing atmosphere of communion with God, in which then turning to Him and explicitly communicating to Him is a natural thing and an easy thing. You don't have to get going again.
Right.
Sometimes in your prayer time, you're kind of, okay, let's go, and you start doing warm-ups, like stretching for the workout or the run. You do a little warm-up, and then you kind of get into it. And I understand that. You're waking up in the morning or whatever. But I think that what a better situation is that you're always in it, so you don't have to warm up to it. Just like if you're always kind of working out and active, you don't have to do warm-up exercise. You're kind of already warmed up. And that's what Paul is referring to here when he says pray without ceasing. We are in that more constant atmosphere or condition of being in communion with God. And I do think that that isn't impossible. You can be rejoicing in that attitude. You can be giving thanks in the things that come forward. And you can also be admonishing and encouraging and helping and being patient, like it says in verse 14, and all the other things that we're to do in our life, doing your job as unto the Lord, loving your family, being involved, but with the Lord present throughout, someone you can turn to and rely on and talk to almost as if he's never gone away or you've gone away from him. And it's not like you go to God for a visit to have prayer and then you go away and do your stuff and then you go back and get into another visit. Paul is talking here about more of an ongoing thing. And I think that's improved even in my own life in the last few years. So this is not to be meant to be a burdensome thing. It is meant to be a joyful thing. Here, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, and everything give thanks. Do you see there's a kind of a frame of cheerfulness that is associated with this exhortation here and
Yeah,
closeness
it's
to
almost
God.
like a frame of mind that you don't leave.
Uh-huh.
If you're doing all these things, you would never come out
I think
of.
that's a good way of putting it, frame of mind. I think it is, which doesn't, of course, exclude the actual giving thanks. But if you have a thankful spirit, then when things come up to give thanks for, it's natural to be thankful for them. And you say, thank you, Lord, for that. Thank you. Thank you, Father. Thank you. And He's right there with you. It's automatic. You don't have to warm up to it. You could just give thanks. That's what I think is going on.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's a good call. I appreciate it. And this is one thing that I think as time, I struggle with this myself. And as I grew in the Lord, this aspect of my life grew as well. But I had to give attention to it. It didn't just happen naturally, by accident, if you will. And this is why Paul admonishes us to do these things, because without the admonishment, we might languish. Let's see. Let's go to Brian in Syracuse. We got time. Let me find you, Brian. Hello, Brian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure to be on it.
Yeah, good to have you.
I just recently caught wind of this show, and I give you my word, I will become a monthly supporter. I believe
that's great.
that this is important. I happened upon the Bible Answer Man broadcast a year ago, and I wish you were on every day. I tell you, I really enjoy your program.
Thank you.
I'm a monthly supporter there too, so I'm enjoying being equipped.
Well, good. Well, super, and those are good sources of being equipped, Hank and the crowd there. How did you stumble upon us then?
Just through the podcast. I was searching for Stephen Meyer's stuff on him because he had him as a guest, and I saw he was on your show. And once I heard you, man, I tell you, I'm hooked. You're a fan. I love how you walk through your reasoning. It's I can learn from it. And
well, thank you. I'm flattered. I appreciate it. So what's on your mind? How can I walk you through some
I
reasoning?
I had a question about the Bible says that every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Mm-hmm. And then also Hebrews says that we have a high priest that can be touched by the feelings of our infirmities. Mm-hmm. For he was tempted in all points like we were, yet without sin.
Right.
And, I'm struggling with Jesus being 100% God, also 100% man, and him not being able to sin. Can you help me with this?
Well, I'm not exactly. Is your frustration that it's hard for you to understand how temptations can be genuine and powerful and felt by Jesus in the way that we feel them if he is God and incapable of sin? Or are you concerned about that James seems to suggest that temptation only comes out of a fallen nature and Jesus didn't have a fallen nature, so how could he be tempted?
Okay. Every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed.
Right.
Was Jesus tempted that way?
He was enticed, but not from his own lust in the sense of fallenness, because Jesus didn't have it. This is what it's like. What this is in James chapter 1, and if this is what's like for fallen man to be enticed by lust. And there you see the series where there's an enticement that is tied to a fallen nature, and then that enticement is dwelled upon and received, and then death is conceived through sin. That is not the same thing that happened with Jesus. Jesus was enticed, but not enticed out of a fallen nature. He was enticed according to his natural desires, but not a fallen nature. He was a human being who had natural desires for appetite and for rest and for sex. All of those things, he had a natural God-given appetite.
Okay. So you're saying he had an appetite for sex?
Sure.
Okay. So that's what I guess that's perfect. Let's go. Let's kind of draw off of that.
All right.
All right. Now, if that's the case, now can he be touched by the infirmity that we have with lust?
Can he be what?
Touched by our infirmity on lust.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by touch, but I think what you're asking is, can he genuinely relate to our infirmity? And I think the answer is yes, he can, because he knows what the enticement is like, because the enticement was there for him as well, just like the enticement was there for Adam, who was enticed even though he had no sin nature. Now, Jesus did not give in to that enticement. He had the opportunities to do that, and I don't think what the text is referring to is that every single exact enticement we had, he had, but rather the kinds of enticements he had, we had, but even much more much more aggressive. He had the kinds of temptations that we had, and therefore he can relate to those temptations, but he did not give in to those temptations. So the temptations were real. And some might argue, well, were they genuinely real or just psychologically real? Because even though Jesus as God could not have sinned, that's my conviction, maybe he didn't know he couldn't sin, or maybe they still felt real to him. I'm not sure how to cash that out, to be honest with you, Brian. But
me neither.
I do think that Jesus' temptations were real, they were deep, and they were profound. They were not exactly like ours, but they were enough because we have a fallen nature that is also appealed to, where he didn't have that fallen nature. But they are adequate enough for him to be able to identify with us and to know what it's like. And see, this I think is really critical about the incarnation, is God isn't just out there kind of academically identifying or academically understanding our struggles and our frustrations, but rather God came down. And this is Philippians chapter 2. God came down, and he got down, and he got low, and he left behind all the glories so that he could live the kind of life that we lived and suffer the kind of things that we suffer, and put himself underneath the contingencies of a fallen world that we experience. And so Jesus understands because he felt it. He went through it. He knows it. He knows it deeper than any of us ever know it. You know, has he been tempted to be angry at a friend who disregarded him like we have? Sure. But he was perfect. He did nothing wrong. He certainly never deserved being abandoned, yet he was abandoned. And so this is where, and if you want to go to a passage, I just have 30 seconds. Not even that, but go to 1 Peter chapter 2, and in verse 21 and following, it talks about Christ as our example, who as a human being suffered the kinds of things that we go through, yet without sin. So I hope that helps there, Brian. Kind of ran out of time there at the end of the segment, but it's a tough theological issue, but I think we can rely on Jesus having experienced what we experienced, and that is enough to identify with us. All the best. That's it for this hour, friends. Stay with us for our final hour at Stand to Reason. I'm Greg Koukl.